Hi, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, don't worry because so am I, and we're just gonna get through this together. So, this channel is mostly gonna consist of book content, some pop culture things, but really it's just gonna be whatever I feel like doing. So, if you're into that, please like and subscribe, and if you end up liking the video, stick around for more because I'm sure I'll make more videos in the future. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about Twilight. Some people love it, some people hate it. We're going to talk about it anyway because, you know, there's some important conversation to be had about it. So why not? So, we're really going to start off with Edward and Bella because that's a doozy. I think that we should start by discussing the original book. As we know, Bella is a very awkward person, and that coincides with how the story as a whole is perceived. This also bleeds into Midnight Sun, but it's definitely more prevalent in her point of view. So, as the story begins, we get a lackluster introduction to her life. She's moving to Forks, Washington because her mom is with a minor league baseball player and he travels a lot and she just doesn't want to deal with that. Her dad is the chief of police and she is moving from Arizona. And that's pretty much all that we get. And she's only in Forks for one single day before everything in her life changes. You know, she raised herself mostly. Like, her and Renee, they were never kind of a mother-daughter duo. They were kind of just getting through it together. With Bella's understanding of love being all over the place, it really doesn't surprise me that she jumped on the first thing that gave her attention. I do feel bad for her because she really seemed lost in her life. And I don't know if Edward was really what was best for her. He treated her like a pet a lot. And even in his POV, we saw her as someone without the ability to be independent, which is ironic with how many times that he explains, or that she explains to him about her upbringing and how she is independent, and that's all she ever has known. You know, the only Cullen we really see looking out for Bella was Rosalie. And even then, all of the other vampires around her didn't really have a strong opinion on the matter of her being turned, which, you know, leaned her toward a feeling of isolation and later a desire to turn. And Rosalie gave her a rational explanation for why she was severely against turning, trying to ever so forcefully change her mind and make her understand completely what she was about to give up. But the Cullens never actually took the initiative to sit her down and explain to her exactly what her options were, how they would affect her life. In retrospect, you know, Bella was stupid for not asking for that. And he really disappointed the story in that way. He could have really saved the whole depression arc in New Moon, and he could have pulled her aside before the woods, or not, like, don't go into the woods when you're telling your girlfriend that you're about to break up with her. And he could have told her exactly why he was leaving and being honest and not lying. That's all he ever did was lie to her, and then left her with a sense of dignity and understanding that it wasn't her and it was the situation that he willingly put her in. That is another thing. He understood the possible consequences that came with a relationship with her, gave into his temptation, and then threw a fit when he made her think it was her fault. "You're just not good for me, Bella." He said that in New Moon. And you know what? My jaw was on the floor. Hello? Like, you have to have some real balls to say that to someone you know put all of her worth into what she thought of you, or what you thought of her. And I think that she was completely blindsided by him leaving. Completely. And especially because he claimed over and over that he would never leave her. And while I think that Bella put way too much of her worth into what Edward thought of her, I think that her depression was honestly justified. Imagine someone you love so much who said that he would never leave you after the first inconvenience, leaving you without any real explanation, spilling what he knows to be lies, leaving you broken and helpless without any sense of understanding and in the actual situation. I mean, he never explained to her exactly why he was leaving, and he never explained what that meant, the actual gravity or exposition or conflict or anything. His only excuse was that she was only human, so she couldn't do anything. But she wanted to be of help, and it's only natural to want to help those you love. Another video, but it relates heavily to the situation of Tamlin and Feyre and ACOTAR. Probably this way. ACOTAR. And how Tamlin was so obsessed with keeping Feyre safe that he heavily neglected her own wishes and want to be of help. Even Lucian found ways for her to help, or at least, tried to make her see why she wasn't of help. I see a lot of parallels between Tamlin and Edward and how their infatuation was disguised as love. I mean, really, as we see Under the Mountain, spoilers if you haven't read ACOTAR, but, he kissed her and, went all over her instead of trying to help her. And this might have been either a fault or strategy used by both of the authors, but I think it had a very different intention for Stephenie Meyer as it did for Sarah J. Maas. We're meant to see Bella and Edward's relationship as romantic and exemplary as opposed to our learned hatred for Tamlin and Feyre's relationship. But they have the same sort of undertones. Edward's unending protection of Bella is something we are supposed to see as admirable, and something that should be expected of men. I think an important thing to discuss is the matter of Bella's soul. Bella sees her soul as something she's bearing to Edward, something that she would be giving to him as a means of staying with him forever. Edward, however, sees it the opposite way. He sees it as a terrible, unforgiving thing, as if her soul is being stripped from her, and this creates tension between the two of them. She explains that in order to become a vampire, you have to give up your soul and change yourself in this irreversible way. And one thing that stuck with me was the idea of damnation. So basically in New Moon, Carlisle and Bella have this conversation about vampires being damned. As a lot of people believe, your soul is the thing that goes to heaven or hell. And because the story was written very heavily with religious undertones, it's counterintuitive to make it a big plot line when in reality you can't go to either heaven or hell without a soul. So really the vampires just cease to exist when they die. If any of the Cullens realized that, I think that the created tension among them would settle. I don't know if that was a writing mistake on Stephanie's part or if it was really what she intended, but I think that a lot of the problems created within this world could have been easily solved if the people just had the critical thinking skills, because so many people could have said, that's not really how it works, that's not. And especially after Bella became a vampire, I noticed myself not understanding why Charlie, of all people, was left in the dark about something like that. Especially after Jacob revealed his identity as a wolf to him, instead of, saying oh no, because in New Moon, or in Breaking Dawn Part 2, there was a lot of oh no, I can't tell you. But in reality, she could have just sat him down and said, I was really, really sick. I had to go to Switzerland. I had to do all of these things, but just know that I'm better and don't worry about me. They could have even came up with an alibi or something like that. They could have said that they got sick on their honeymoon. There was a virus going around in Brazil, so we had to evacuate or something like that. And we ended up in Switzerland. But that didn't happen. They just pulled this weird move saying oh no, I can't tell you, we have to leave if I tell you. But in the end, that really didn't help anything, and that obviously does not help the situation with Renesmee and her growing 10 times the size of when they saw her last, when she was literally 3 months old, literally a baby. And so I feel like they just could have been honest with him in some aspect, and then that would have made this story have 10 times more continuity and made it more believable that Charlie could think that something normal was going on, especially with Renesmee. And I don't really see how Bella was... I think it was completely out of character for Bella to be okay with that. I don't know, knowing where she came from and that she kind of had to parent her mother and the Cullens were doing to her and how they were lying to her and not just her family, but to her. I mean, let's be honest, they lied to her about a lot of things that I don't necessarily know why Bella was so on board to lie to her dad, especially after they went through all of that trouble in Twilight to like make sure that he was safe, make sure that he was, I just don't understand. We seeing the way that Edward manipulated her other relationships, I genuinely don't understand why Edward was so threatened by Jacob. I mean, why was he threatened by a 16-year-old he knows has no competition over him? Like, why does he feel the need to be so protective over Bella that she couldn't even go see him as a friend in Eclipse? Like, they were engaged, literally engaged to be married. Like, what do you think's gonna happen? And I don't know, like, Edward being like, oh, I don't trust him. Like, if you don't trust him, why are you making it Bella's problem? Bella is an adult, obviously not as old as you, but she's still an adult, and I don't understand this whole thing of loving her so much that you need to protect her, but not trusting her enough to let her make her own decisions. You know, if you can't trust Jacob, that's a conversation for you and Jacob. Don't put Bella in between that just because it's going to make it difficult for you to have a trusting relationship. Like, it doesn't make sense. Jacob was there for her in New Moon. You were not. And so I don't get this whole thing of not trusting her around him when that was the only thing that she had for so long. He was there for her when you were gone for 6 months because you couldn't deal with your own self-loathing. And he was there for her, and that's it. That's all that he was to her. And she made that very clear. And, you know, I hate what Stephenie Meyer did to his character in Eclipse. I hate it because he was changed in a way that was not him. Like, all the things that he did were unforgivable, and I truly think that it was a character assassination on Stephanie's part, because she wanted everybody to be Team Edward because that's the way that she wanted the story to sway. And, you know, she ruined the character. Sick and tired of people defending Edward for his actions because of his age. Because if we're gonna say, like, oh my gosh, don't blame Edward for leaving Bella, don't blame him, like, he's only mentally 17, like, okay, well, if he's mentally 17, then we need to have that conversation with Jacob. Jacob was what, like 17, 18, maybe, when the series ended? He was young, and even younger when he and Bella started to flirt, and, like, all of that in New Moon. He was a child. I'm not defending his actions because those were unforgivable, and you should know by that age that those things are unacceptable. But no, that's not a defense of Jacob, but I think that he made his own decisions and made them poorly. And also Edward did too. So you can't have that conversation. You can't have that debate when there's flaws on both sides. But I'm just tired of people defending Edward and not giving Jacob the same treatment. Like, come on. Edward has been 17 for 100 years. And if I was 17 for 100 years, I think I would know how to handle myself better than that. You would know that to trust your partner, if that was a real issue, then you wouldn't be with them. But I don't think that Carlisle and Esme helped with that sort of dynamic at all. Yeah, like, he's their favorite son, and that's obviously a catalyst for the way that he acts and the way that they see him, you know, doing no wrong. He could do nothing bad, and he needs no help in the way that he acts. And I think that I genuinely mean this when I say that Rosalie was the only person who really understood her surroundings. You know, she tried to convince Bella of all the things that were going to happen when she turned into a vampire. She tried to explain to Edward that this meant bringing the humans into their lives, like explaining that bringing home Bella would mean bringing home a whole lot more than just a human. And she was there for Bella when she was having her baby, and she was really the only one who adapted to the situation and tried to keep a level head. And I think that Rosalie, like, she was one of the youngest Cullens. I mean, she's younger than Edward, not physically, but chronologically younger, and she saw less of the world. Like, she has been on Earth for a shorter time than him. But yeah, and I'm gonna say an opinion, and y'all can't get mad at me, but I don't think the Cullens are good people. I think that they're more morally charged because they don't eat humans. I don't know if that's because eating humans is always going to be wrong, and there's always going to be some implications with that. So I don't know if that necessarily makes you a good person just because you don't eat them. But yeah, I don't think that they're good people. I think that they're all very, very self-righteous, and I don't really think that they care about humans at all, especially the humans around them. I mean, like, we see that in Midnight Sun that every other chapter Edward is calling them kids or juvenile or stupid or whatever. I mean, I don't think that makes him a bad person because, you know, we all have our opinions about other people. But, I mean, he obviously just doesn't know how to communicate his feelings, and the things that he says makes it clear that he doesn't want to be taught how to be a good partner. He doesn't want to be talked down to, and he wants to lean into the fantasy that Bella has created for their relationship. You know, and I think that, again, Carlisle and Esme can see this, and they don't care, because, you know, at least he has someone that he can, you know, fall back on. He's happy or whatever. But, you know, if you think about it, he's literally making Bella's life hell by not being the partner that she needs. And that's a fact, is not the partner that Bella needs. She needs someone who's supporting her and is kind of helping her through this parentification that she's gone through. And Edward always just kind of coddled her and babied her and made her feel less than him and made her feel unworthy of him, and that's just not what you do when someone has gone through that trauma. I mean, she needs help in erasing that sort of mindset, and like and there are just things that you need to notice in people like that, and he just never gave it the time of day. And I don't think that that's a good thing, especially when both characters are very, very, very codependent on each other. But I think at the end of the day, that is kind of what makes the story so magical and mystical and so admirable. And, you know, you want it because Stephanie romanticized it, and like that sort of relationship is so admirable. And it's the whole Romeo and Juliet thing, you know, like they always have to be with each other. They can't be anyone else's. You can't have friends. And, you know, I also think that contributes to the unrealistic standards of today's love stories, and it's what makes people's idea of love so clouded and misconstrued. It's because we have these stories constantly floating around us with different ideals of what it means to be in love. But 95% of the time, like, those things aren't necessarily healthy. And I guess Twilight isn't necessarily supposed to be taken as seriously. It's obvious in the movies, especially, that it's kind of a satirical take on vampirism. And you know, you kind of have to take it for what it is. It's not something that is a real representation of what it means to be in love. But you can't get over the fact that Bella and Edward's relationship will always be one that people want to have and will see as something achievable and, you know, admirable. But I don't think that it's a good thing, because we've seen throughout this video, I mean, it's very difficult to find control and constraints wantable. You know, it's so unrealistic that Bella would ever want to be controlled the way that she was. Even if Edward was a vampire, you have to admit that the things that he did to her were kind of like weird. And it goes back to the point of people saying like, oh, well, he was born in a different time. He was born when women were seen as, you know, protectable and they always had to be protected and they just blah blah blah. I understand what you mean by him like just feeling this innate need to always protect and always be there for his significant other, but that also doesn't make sense to me that, you know, Edward would be like that, because he's lived through so many decades and so many eras of time that he could have adapted to that pretty easily. He could have adapted to the way that the world was around him, especially because he's 17. I'm 17 right now, and, you know, seeing all of these trends online and seeing the way that the world is changing, you kind of, at this age, you're kind of at this point where you adapt to those things, you participate in them. And so Edward being in that position, I think, would have an easier time adapting to those things that were going on around him. So yeah, that point just never made sense to me, because I don't understand why you would see the relationship dynamics around you change so heavily that you are still stuck thinking this way that hasn't been the way that people have thought for years. But back to the point of Bella and Edward and this whole protection thing, it just doesn't make sense to me that Bella would want to be protected like that. Like, why would she want Edward to not let her fight in the battles? And why would she just let him do the things that, like, especially, okay, so there's this part in Eclipse where they're all, you know, getting ready for the battle, blah blah blah, and Edward tells Bella to like stay at his house because like she can't do anything, so she's gonna have to stay at the house because it's protection for her. And she just kind of blindly goes along with it, which never, I that doesn't make sense to me, because why would she not want to be involved in the whole like battle? I don't know. And okay, also in Eclipse, the battle is what really gets me, is the fact that she could just be okay with, you know, sitting up in a tent, not doing much, kind of running, trying to run away with Edward. Why? Because she spent all of her life serving other people in this way that was kind of irreversible to her. She couldn't unlearn how to be the giving person that she is. And so what makes the reader think that she would just easily blindly go along with this? And yeah, like why would we as readers and watchers of the movie, I guess, kind of agree that that is the route that she should have gone on when it's not, and it's not how anybody in that situation would have reacted. But yeah, I really didn't understand that. And then just this whole situation of the Edward Jacob thing, I genuinely think that Stephenie Meyer never intended for Jacob to be an actual love interest. Controversial, I know, but I don't think that she actually thought that he would be anything, especially because I know that he had a bigger role in the Twilight movie, but in the OG Twilight book, he was in the book for probably like a page, like not even exaggerating, probably a page altogether. So I don't think a character in the book for a page was really meant to be, even in, like, especially because he became such a huge character in the next book. I don't think that he was meant to be with Bella if that is how his character was introduced. And I understand, like, oh, well, like, he was in New Moon, all of those things. He was the love interest in New Moon. I don't understand that argument, because Bella spent over half the book of New Moon sulking over Edward. And, like, there's no denying that. She'd be happy with Jake for, like, a chapter, and then go back to seeing something that reminded her of Edward, and then going back into that depressive state. He was never, like, and Bella even herself admitted that he was never seen as a love interest to her. He was never seen as anything more than just a friend. And he obviously didn't catch on to that, but that is not Bella's fault. But okay, I'm gonna refute that statement. It is kind of her fault, because she did kind of lead him on in different ways. Like, yeah, I can see people saying, like, oh, well, she led him on, she almost kissed him. I do see that, actually. So I'm gonna refute the statement I just said. I do see that. I just think that Jacob was never meant to be for Bella, and obviously Breaking Dawn, proved that with the whole imprinting thing that we won't speak about, because it's weird, and it's weird that Stephenie Meyer made that a thing. Like, not, why did you make imprinting a thing, and why did you make it so that it could happen on, like, infants? It's weird. But yeah, we're not going to speak about the imprinting thing, because that was something I want to block out. But yeah, so I just really think that it was always meant to be Edward, and the whole Jacob thing was just I think it was for publicity. I think it was to get people to read the book, which, Stephenie Meyer, if you had a love interest that wasn't so problematic, then you wouldn't need another competitor to kind of prove to be better or worse than the other one. And I think, okay, we're gonna get into another thing, and about the whole Bella, Jacob, Edward love triangle. I genuinely think that the whole character assassination of Jacob was to make Edward seem like the better man. Let's be for real, people. Jacob nor Edward was the better man. They both were so flawed. They both acted out of passion, out of emotion, when they should have just kept being a rational person. They threw that out the window just for their lust of Bella, really. And I think, really, Jacob was used to make Edward look like the more desirable love interest. Like, why did Jacob have to do that? Do all of those things to Bella? We know why. Because she wanted to make Edward look like this savior, like this hero, like he could do no wrong. And I guess that was achieved. But it's still to this day. I first read the books probably like 4 years ago. I first read the books and watched the movies 4 years ago, and I don't like either of them. I genuinely don't like either love interest. I think that they both put their own needs above Bella's, which is exactly the opposite of what you should do for your partner. I mean, they both treated her like an object. They both treated her like some competition prize to be won. And I think that wasn't, I don't think Bella really wanted to be won. I think she just wanted to be loved. And I think she just wanted to be loved in a way that she never felt before, and in a way that no one else gave her. She came from a very, very broken place. She came from a very broken home. I mean, her parents were never really parents to her. And so I think she just needed somebody to understand her and to support her and to not baby her, because she doesn't need babied. She needs guided, I guess, but like everybody needs guided, you know, and your partner should be there to do that for you. But Stephenie Meyer wrote her 2 love interests that were not good, not even close. I honestly, okay, I'm gonna say something very, very controversial. Very controversial. I think that Mike Newton would have been a good love interest to her. Guys, I think that Mike Newton really could have given her what she wanted and what she needed. Because, you know, like, she needed a guy as plain as her. She needed a guy who could match her freak. She needed a guy who could match her freak, and she was given the exact opposite. Stephenie Meyer gave her a guy that was over the top in looks, in action, in blah blah blah. And then she gave her a guy that like was bad to her. Like she screwed Bella over big time. And I think that she deserved Mike Newton because that kid was just there. That kid was along for the ride. He had a crush, you know, he was sweet, he was nice, and I think that could have been really good for Bella. I think that could have been really good. It could have healed her, and she could have had a nice little relationship. She could have had a nice little life, graduated high school, gone to college, you know, maybe met someone else there, had a family, had a life. And I think that that's what Bella deserved. I don't think that she deserved to be turned into a vampire. And I say that not out of like, she didn't deserve it, she didn't, blah blah blah. That's not what I mean. I mean that she didn't deserve that fate because it was a fate that she never would have wanted. It's a fate that I don't believe that she ever understood. I think that it was unfair of her to be turned in the way that she did with so little knowledge. And I think that there was this whole plot point in New Moon of Rosalie and everyone else making a point of being like, well, Bella, you have a choice. You have a choice and you're choosing wrong. You have a choice. And while I understand the frustration that comes with that, especially with Rosalie and the fact that she really was given no choice. Like, she really was never given that choice. I also genuinely don't think that Bella had a choice either. I don't think that Bella had a choice because she wasn't given examples of a life that she could have had, because she saw everything that she didn't want. She didn't want a life like Renee. She didn't want a life like Charlie. She didn't want all of these human lives that she was surrounded by. And so she went to the next best thing, which was her vampire boyfriend and her vampire, you know, family-in-law. You know, that's really sad because she was never given an example of what, you know, a fulfilling human life could have been. And I think that really kind of proves that the choice was robbed of her. Or she was robbed of the choice. I don't know that the argument of like her having a choice is really valid anymore when you see the way that her life was playing out. She needed a way out. She needed that. And Edward gave her what she thought she wanted. Edward gave her a life of love and, you know, of forever being with those who gave her comfort, who gave her that found family that she never had. But, you know, the consequences of that were so overwhelming that I don't think she fully understood what she was getting herself into, especially at 18 years old. I mean, she got married at 18. Freshly 18, by the way. She freshly out of high school is what I mean. And that is scary. And I'm not here, I don't want to judge anybody for getting married young, because like, if you know, you know. Like, that's my sentiment. If you know, you know. But I mean, all of this just to turn into a vampire. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that all of this was done just to achieve something else. I don't think she actually wanted to be married. I don't think she wanted to get married, especially not at that age. Maybe later, but not at this age. She wanted to be turned after graduation. She didn't want to get married after graduation. I think that's a distinction that needs to be made. Both marriage and being turned into a vampire are both very, very, very huge life decisions and life altering events. I mean, like, Edward could not have been so naive into thinking that she wanted to be married to him. Like, he can't be so naive to think that that's all she wanted was to be married. And let me back up, because I think that the ultimatum that he gave her was totally unfair. I'm just gonna say that right now. The ultimatum that he gave her of like, I'll turn you into a vampire if you marry me. I'll only turn you into a vampire if you marry me. Totally unfair and totally immature of him. And I think somebody should have stopped that right there. Somebody should have said, whoa, Edward, no, she's 18 years old. You're not doing that. Especially Carlisle, because he was like, I'll change you, Bella, after graduation, which I also think was like stupid. But, yeah, somebody, especially like Rosalie, where was she? Where was the level-headedness and the rationality when Edward was making all these ultimatums that were too much. But, yeah, the fact that Edward even had to make the ultimatum proves to you that she wasn't ready for any of it. And I don't want people to be like, oh, well, like, if she could have handled being a vampire, she can handle getting married, blah, 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 blah. And like, chirping at that, when really she did not know what she was getting herself into at all. Again, those vampires told her nothing of what being a vampire actually meant. Nothing. They only told her, no, like, you don't want this. And we all know that kids gravitate towards like what they don't have, what they can't have. And so people telling her no, she's gonna want to do it. She's gonna want to be one. And especially because her boyfriend is one, so like, why wouldn't follow the herd or whatever? Like, she wants to be one, like, because he's one. Yeah, so I just don't understand. I genuinely don't understand that ultimatum. And I think it was very, very immature, and I think it was poor writing on Stephenie Meyer's part, to be honest. Because if you have to force your main character, really, she had no other choice, or else she wasn't going to get what she wanted. And so if you have to force your main character to marry the person that you claim that she loves, and like that she thinks she loves, then, this relationship really had no backbone. It really was not anything that was like so cemented in fates, and it was destiny, it was blah blah blah, it's Romeo and Juliet or whatever. No. If you have to put that on her, if you have to put this ultimatum and this choice in a way that is so unbelievably a lose-lose situation, then that's not really a main character that's worth rooting for, in my opinion. And I think Bella's a good character. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, I hated Bella's character because she did this, and this. She was 17 years old. She was 18 years old. I think that she was written in a way that she was meant to fail. She was meant to be turned into a vampire. And at the end of the day, when you think about everything that all of the Cullens have done, and you think about everything that happened in her life, it's a lose-lose situation. And it's a failure. And I feel bad for her, even though, like, it was her fault, I guess. But, like, I also just feel bad that she was put in that situation. So, yeah, I mean, that's my Twilight take. If you enjoyed the video, please like this video and subscribe. And yeah, I think the next video I'm gonna make is on ACOTAR. So if you're into that, stay tuned because I think it's gonna come soon. So anyway, have a good night, y'all. Bye.